Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending to this presentation that is called Empowering Teachers and Learners Through Autonomy. My name is Marisol Guzman Cova, and well, I am currently finishing my PhD studies in the University of Southampton in England. And since 20 years ago, I've been working as a teacher educator and well, in many other areas in the Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla. Today, I would like to share with you the most important aspects of my research. And basically, I have been researching about autonomy, specifically teacher autonomy. So during this presentation, the main purpose is to present some of my findings and of course details about my research. And due to the current circumstances we are living today in education with distance education, I'm going to make some reflections that are tied in this importance of autonomy in our everyday as teachers, as learners, in general in education. For that purpose, I would like to start with some reflective questions. Yes, and the first and the most important. Do you provide any sort of freedom to your students during your classes? I know that some teachers value more when your students are quiet and relaxed and they are just covering the activities that you ask them to do. However, the importance to have certain moments to know what you think and what's your opinion and what can you provide to construct knowledge is also important, don't you think? The second question is about your educational setting. Do you have any freedom or do you have possibilities to control your teaching in your school? Unfortunately, well, sometimes we don't have as teachers that space or freedom for, let's call it contextualize our teaching. That means base our efforts on the sort of students we have, their interest, their needs, and that is very important because in this globalized world, the new generations are changing. They are having access to more communication and gadgets and different um, kinds of communication in general. And we need to prepare them for this new world that they have to cope with. And the third question is, do you think that autonomy empowers participants in online classes? The initial question was empower teachers and learners. However, the real conditions we are living now are different. Yes, sometimes teachers, I have heard my colleagues are stressed because working online is time consuming because their students are not always responding in the same way as in the face to face interaction, or they give them pretext to say, I cannot participate with you. And that is awful. But let's see another angle of this situation. How can autonomy help us as teachers and help our students as learners to take the control of the process? And maybe in this reflective question, it's very important to comment that maybe we weren't prepared for this change. However, as teachers, we can implement something that is that part of the purpose of education. Stop observing education as an obligation instead of a right we all have to increase our capacities, to develop our skills, and the most important, yes, to see the world in a different way. Okay, after this reflection, let's start with this presentation. Basically, I'm coming back to my research. I'm going to give you like key concepts that were important to analyze my data. I'm going to explain you what my methodology was. And of course, I'm going to share with you some important results at the same time, as I said, in order to make it meaningful, because maybe my research can be interesting for some, but not essential for many. Uh, what if we link these findings with realities that we are living in different educational settings, but basically in education? Yes, and finally, well, I'm going to present some important conclusions and some suggestions coming back to the current situation we all uh, cope with in these days. Well, let's start. I said that my research is based, or well, focuses on autonomy. What is that? Autonomy is a complex word to understand and research. But well, let's start uh, since the beginning. Yeah, it's a word that is compounded by Greek roots that means authos or self, and nomos or law or rule. This word was initially used to refer to independent Greek cities guided by their own rules. And this is important because once you have the control, um, all your efforts have or are guided, yeah, with a purpose that you know more than anyone because you are inside. So your autonomy is helping you not just to have freedom, not just to have control. uh, this can help you to orientate your efforts with a specific purpose. This is a good starting point to understand and then to make a reality. Well, talking about education, the goal of autonomy is to reestablish a democratic process in the learning teaching that entails commitment and empowerment of participants. This is a very interesting definition because well, in my experience as a researcher, in all the educational settings I visited with all my participants and colleagues who I had the opportunity to share some of my findings, we don't have this idea clear. And this is one of the most important problems of autonomy is not defined in the same way. We are not visualizing autonomy like something essential in our everyday activities. Maybe the documents, yeah, the curricula and the policies we are following, they mention autonomous process, autonomy in your life, like an autonomous person. But what do we mean when we mention autonomy? Okay, now let's be more specific. By the way, I am, well, you are watching pictures from my participants. They were teaching English in very different educational settings, for example, here at university. All my participants were pre-service teachers, and well, I'm going to mention this with more detail later. Well, teacher autonomy is a capacity that combines willingness with personal teaching capacities. And this is the second stage to pay attention at. Because if you have that willingness, it's not necessarily an obtained result or the same result that all teachers who have willingness. Without actions, without the development of certain capacities, the reality is not changing. Yes, so that's why we need to be very reflective um, and critical. Not with criticism. Critical in the sense of reflecting what sort of activities I am doing in my teaching. Reflective practice can help us to see the degree of autonomy that we can have or we implement in our classrooms. Well, here is another big definition that was implemented in a big event in Europe, yeah, more or less to standardize the vision of what autonomy is. It's a very complex, in my opinion, but it catches my attention a lot because of the last part. Mhm. Teacher autonomy is the competence to develop as a self-determined, Notice the importance here of your agency. Socially responsible, because teachers now are considered agents of change. And critically aware participants in and beyond educational environments. Now the role of the teacher is changing, and because of those reasons I said before, yeah, we are living in a globalized world. So the important things are not just occurring inside a classroom. We are not into a box. We are exposed in a world, yeah, that is interconnected everywhere all the time. So somehow we need to keep this in mind as teachers, yes, and prepare our students for this mm, expansive um, proportion or impact of our efforts, yes, um, within a vision of education as interpersonal empowerment in social transformation. Again, the word empower comes here. What empowers a teacher is not just taking the control, yes, in a sense, but also when you let your students take that control too and make them empower or support them to empower themselves as critical learners. That makes a big difference between um, common efforts, yeah, and that special purpose to make your students being dynamic thinkers. That is important too. Well, the last definition that I would like to comment, just for contextualize you in my research, is that Benson recently has defined two dimensions or perspectives when analyzing teacher autonomy. The first is in the place. He calls it situation, because that is that freedom that is granted to teachers to exercise their discretion in teaching. The setting providing you some sort of freedom for teaching. And then um, attributionally, yeah, what the characteristics you have, your internal capacities can be developed to exercise this freedom productively. It's not a freedom to do what I want, but the freedom to do what I observe is necessary with these specific students in this specific time. And that is important. Well, this is my methodology in my research. I was developing a qualitative research, and it was a multiple case study. I have 13 participants. All of them were language teacher trainees doing their TESOL practicum. And for many of them, their professional practices were the first real opportunity for teaching in real scenarios. There are many schools that are enrolled in this program and they ask for this service, and our students are going there to teach English in the role of teachers. And some of them also teach English in the same university. I was observing three different cohorts from spring 2018 to spring 2019. Well, maybe a semester is not a very long period for observing important development, teaching development. But believe me that during a semester, when participants had the opportunity to reflect on their teaching, changes were observed. For collecting my data, I use these instruments. And well, I selected some of my participants with a questionnaire, but once in the study for answering to my research questions, I use semi-structured interviews, class observation, audio recordings of those classes. In total, there were 52 observed classes. My participant reflections, written and oral, because sometimes after the class they were saying what their impressions were and why they took some decisions, etc. everything counted, because it is not easy to investigate the nature of these teachers who claim to be autonomous. Uh, I also developed a research diary, writing details on every participant, setting, mentors, supervisors, in order to see like the big picture that surrounded them. And as I said, we also had informal conversations. My data analysis was done using the software in vivo, and this was very, very useful to code my data. However, I have to say that mm, a very important proportion of my data was analyzed in paper, because it was a big process of understanding, yeah, the actions that at the first sight didn't appear like something very autonomous, because my participants were not experienced teachers. And well, I didn't write this here, but basically my research questions were very specific, yeah, about the nature and development of teacher autonomy in trainees, the importance of creativity, and I'm going to explain you why creativity, and the impact of the setting. These three aspects were very related, and that's why in my data analysis, I did a triangulation between the actions that I observed in the classroom and then my participants' reflections explaining the reasons for behaving in that way. And also, I was fitting this with the literature, yeah, like matching where in the theory their actions were, and what were the new aspects that I found, if there were new aspects. Um, and this was a very fruitful research. As I said before, one of the key ingredients of these teachers uh, was creativity. Creativity has been studied and defined, as well as autonomy, in many areas of our life in the world, especially for arts. But in the field of education, creativity has not taken a specific role, because it is difficult to define it, to be or to have the same definition for everyone. As well as autonomy, creativity is like context sensitive, because not in all schools autonomy and creativity have the same value as in others, yes, or any space for practicing them, or allowing the teacher to have some freedom in creative proposals. If we see the definition, creativity is considered a key component of learner-centered pedagogy that support the development of creative language experiences. And I want to stop a little bit here with a reflection that is into my data, because my participant you see in the picture was teaching in a public kindergarten, where English is not part of the curricula. Obviously, there is not an English teacher in the school. The school was interested in providing the students with some English lessons, to have this facility in the school. When my participant arrived, of course, he had to cope with difficult circumstances. Yeah, maybe not enough spaces, not a mentor in the classroom, not too many tools for teaching. But his creativity was very important, uh, because difficult circumstances not just meant crowded groups or lack of tools, but also the schedules for the class. As English was not very important, he had the last hour of the day, or his class was during the lunchtime. So I really admired his decision to and determination to go through those circumstances and say, okay, in this picture, you are observing my last class observation. It was very late, and the children, they were obviously tired. And when my participant started his lesson, and the children were participating and happy, but after the first activity, I noticed they were like tired, maybe hungry. They were distracting each other. And he noticed that. So he suddenly said, okay, do you remember your animal masks? Come and wear them. Yes, and some of them were asking, teacher, I don't have my mask. And he had a pencil for makeup, and he was drawing lovely mustaches and noses and convert them into lovely bunnies. And the problem was solved. He took them outside the classroom and they continued with the class. As you can see, the children were again motivated, um, happy to collaborate, to sing, to dance. But obviously, due to the hour, it was very hot, it was very late, and well, the scheduled day was almost finishing. So once they concluded this activity, they went back to the classroom. Reflecting on this, and of course, understanding with literature, what made the change in this class was his creative decision, yeah, to continue with the activities, but under different circumstances. In this case, outside and with an extra element that were the masks. These two simple things make the children like coming back again to the class, entering and participating with energy again. Once we left the classroom, he was telling me that this was very common, that the schedule was not easy for him, and he had to um, notice or improvise, yeah, actions that bring his students back to the class. Unfortunately, these conditions are not strange for some of us, yeah, because English is not having the main schedules or the best schedules during the day. And well, when the ring rang, the kids were out of the classroom, and I saw their enthusiasm to say, "Teacher, teacher, goodbye." They are so young, but they connected that intention of seeing the teacher and the channel of communication that we are using. So his efforts were worthy because children were connecting, not just having like this personal feeling or bonds with the teacher. No, no, no. It was like integration of these efforts. The same participant with a different activity and a different day. Um, and agency was another important element in this investigation. What is agency? Well, when the teacher focuses on self conscious decisions and reflective teaching actions. Mm, as you can see, the children look very tired because the same. They were eating, and after that, it was the English class. So the girl that is standing in front was always running around distracting the others. She's a super leader in the classroom. What my participant did was, hey, come on, come here, help me. Help me to sing and monitor your classmates for the following song. And she was very happy doing that role. She was dancing and singing, and the children in this picture, the activity hasn't started. But once he started with the song, the children stood, started up and they started participated. So It was a good strategy, and that capacity, he had to take decisions in the right moment, complemented his efforts for making a class a successful experience for his young learners. So I think, well, this is one of many other examples, but as Benson reflects, the development of autonomy entails the establishment of a personal agenda and the conception of personal agency guided by personal meanings and purposes. In this case, he took advantage of the situation, of this dynamic leader in the classroom, and the class was so fluid and considered successful in the sense that all children finally participated. Identity was another characteristic that was a commonality or a constant amongst my participants. And Tom is another participant who was teaching English in a secondary school. I remember the first day I observed him. It was my first observation out of the university. I have to confess that I had been always working at university, and this experience was very very special because I couldn't understand what was happening. All the adolescents were not paying attention, not following my participants' instructions. They were talking, they were laughing, they were fighting. And my poor participant was so nervous, looking at me, trying to find out any answer, any support, anything, yeah, to solve his problems. I couldn't intervene. I was just the observer, the researcher. But he was asking for feedback, and he was reflecting a lot about these specific sort of students, about their age, their interests, their specific characteristics that converted a mess the English class. So with the time, and this is the last class observation, notice the interest the students have on that activity. They had encrypted messages, and he was enjoying his class because children, well, they are not children, teenagers, were very engaged in this competition. They wanted to finish even the rank again, and they didn't leave the classroom as before. They wanted to finish the activity, and it was the last hour of the day. In the first observation, they immediately left the room without listening to homework or anything. But in this class, the situation had been transformed. That part of my participants recognized themselves or claimed that they were autonomous teachers made a big difference with the results during the courses. Well, the triangulation I said was combining the actions I observed as a researcher that helped me to make the initial coding and the distribution of data. It took me months to understand that though some aspects were internal and some others were external factors. Then I compare this with the reflections, yeah, what they say after those teaching experiences. And I also wanted to know more about their nature or characteristics as teachers, as very novice teachers. And finally, I was checking this with the literature, comparing development with different models and definitions and information regarding autonomous teachers. This was basically my first stage, understanding what was happening in the classroom. As they are learning to teach, that's why it is called teacher-learner autonomy. Yeah, but basically, is the autonomy a teacher has in the classroom. Yeah, These internal capacities finally were divided into capacities that were not innate, because they were practicing and they were developing skills for being creative and practicing also to develop their agency. How was it observed? Well, through the application of creative teaching, improvisation, adaptation to the setting, creative use of technologies in settings that provided them, of course. Regarding knowledge of teaching, this is a definition, by the way, that says that teacher autonomy is based on capacities, knowledge, and attitudes of a teacher. Regarding this knowledge, they were able to observe their learners, reflect on their needs, reflect on their cognitive characteristics. In general, they research of their characteristics of their audience, and they had a constant self-evaluation of their actions. That made the real difference, because again, reflective practice is telling us if we are taking good decisions or we are not very connected with the setting. And finally, the personal positive attributes that participants had, the most important or common were willingness, motivation, and empathy. They wanted to be there in the in the shoes of their students to understand them better. Regarding the external factors, and these were in the educational setting, of course, the ethos of every school was different. And as a consequence, the freedom they had for teaching was different. How was this analyzed? This was through the freedom they had to implement creative teaching, or they had an exclusive use of the textbooks, or all the efforts had to be with a purpose to answer standardized exams, and that was the only aim of the course. These aspects were relevant because my participants have to adapt their efforts to every school. Regarding their students or their learners, some of them were able to engage them in their learning process, and some others support them to be autonomous, and obviously that motivates them more to participate in the class. And this part was amazing, because some researchers conclude that when you give freedom to students, sometimes there is a vulnerable moment for you because you don't have the entire control. The same happens with creativity. Some teachers prefer not to take that risk because of disorder in the classroom, noise, or not control. Yes, of course, maybe you will have some noisy moments, but believe me, the results were totally different when learners were able to have certain active participation and control. And well, the third element that was also important were the mentors in the schools. Some of them supported my participants, and also scaffold them in the teaching sense, showing them how to manage the group, how to cope with common struggle in the classroom. Or the opposite, they were hampering them, controlling them a lot, or making them feel bad in front of the students, and that was not a positive result, of course, in those examples. Well, this second stage, and it took me a lot of time to reflect and see the connection and construct this. Now, the capacities, knowledge for teaching, and attitudes is coded according to the reflections my participants have. Yes, the first column shows those creative capacities and teaching skills that they were able to manage. Okay. Another aspects of teacher autonomy are the way they manage teaching and solve constraints. So they implemented creative materials, using games, activities to make a dynamic lesson. They were able to improvise, to adapt, of course, being good observers and noticing when was this necessary. When they have technologies, they use them creatively. And of course, they also support, well, some of them support learner autonomy and empowerment. This is related again because when the learner had some freedom, they had that control, they had that empowerment, and in total, like a general observation, the result in the group was totally different. They gave their students extra materials to complement the contents in the course. They were supporting the cognitive student development with the sort of exercises they were working with and how they were mentoring them in a personalized way with um, paying more attention on everybody's needs. I know that we all, well, many of us are coping with very large groups, and sometimes this is not very easy. And now that we are working online is more difficult, but well, there are strategies that we can use. And finally, the development of their agency. As you can see, this is like matching my previous graph, because now in the reflections and is matched that were matched with their actions comes the same: the observation and reflection, their constant self-evaluation. They were constantly asking for feedback, researching to understand sorry, their audience, and of course adapting their lesson plans to the setting and modifying when it was necessary. More specifically, what were the attitudes that they had as teachers that basically showed a personal engagement as teachers? Empathy, willingness, motivation. They created effective bonds with learners. They were enjoying teaching. They had engagement with their learners. And basically, all this represented a very positive professional identity. Well, finally, regarding the setting, every school had different conditions. The positive ones regarding mentors, when they scaffold and support my participants, make a difference. Negative, well, when they had random mentoring or not mentoring at all, when they were hampering my participants' actions or even their motivation. I remember one mentor who was constantly correcting my participant in front of the students, scolding her and making her feel like bad. That was not so good, but well, it has very negative results. Uh, Regarding the learners, when they gave their students opportunities to scaffold, to help each other, they were enjoying more that learning, of course, through dynamic activities, and they were learning with commitment. They were participating, doing homework, um, being part of the group entirely. And of course, the negative part was discipline as a constant constraint, especially with younger students, and their lack of engagement. Related to the class and the setting in general, well, the positive aspects were supportive conditions and freedom for teaching. And the common constraints were large groups, hard schedules for the class, because English was not as important as other um, subjects, sorry, discipline issues, lack of teaching conditions, short and sporadic lessons, exclusive use of a textbook, and lack of freedom for teaching. Well, what can we reflect about this? Rebolledo and Smith, in their book regarding action research, said that an autonomous teacher is not just the one with freedom for teaching, but a teacher whose capacities are observed for a personal and context benefit. I think that autonomy is very related to this construction of bottom up pedagogies. Real pedagogies that are based on our students or realities, the things that we already have in the classroom. Um, Look at my participant teaching in a public primary school with not much space, with not good conditions, with a lot of children, mm, with not mentoring and support. So they survived to this experience, but they were just in the professional practices. For teachers who are living this reality, it's important to just adjust their efforts, basing their strategies and methodologies, materials, and everything they have in the reality they have. Because she had, well, this group was enrolled in a program for learning English, but the book had contents that the students didn't understand. Their English or language background was very different, and they weren't able to understand even a paragraph in the book. It was complex, even in Spanish, for their age and for their experiences. So the teacher has more responsibilities, because if the materials are not connected with the children, because they are normally models that are just adapted to conditions, those conditions are not always ready for understanding those materials. So I think autonomy helps us to create that, as I said, bottom up pedagogy instead of a top down that is not considering realities in our classrooms. Well, that's why the capacities to manage teaching and solve constraints in this study were basically observed in teachers who were good observers, who were applying critical thinking before and during a lesson, checking if the activities were um, understood well, and constant self evaluation. As a conclusion, I would like to say that teacher autonomy can support autonomy in learners. If we start reading this graph from the top, the educational setting has an important role, yes. Once they provide us with freedom and supportive conditions, well, agency and identity can be developed as a key capacities for teachers to take control of their actions. In blue, it is my research result. But as external comments, I observed that their continuous professional development was an important factor to develop agency and identity. They were preservist teachers, but the ones who had experiences working abroad, for example, in summer camps, or having extra modules of teaching or teaching experience, had like more ideas, yeah, or how to solve constraints, or how to implement methodologies, or apply those things that learned in the courses or in their experiences. So it's the same for us as in service teacher, yes, with that continuous professional development, we are like achieving new skills, understanding more theories, acquiring more information, developing more skills, and that is essential for us to grow up. We never finish learning to teach, in my humble opinion. Well, and then in my coming back to my research, as I said, empathy, willingness, and motivation were internal attitudes that were um, a commonality amongst successful participants regarding autonomy. And well, they were like planning and looking for attractive and creative activities and materials. Yeah, they were supporting critical thinking, and they had or provide their students certain freedom to create their outputs. Finally, as a conclusion, these actions empower both learners and teachers. And that's the reason to call this presentation in this way, yeah? Because maybe my purpose in my research was about autonomy. But now, in a wider view, observing the big picture, I noticed that the final result is an empowerment. And I think this is so positive. Another comment I did is not part of my research is that when you contextualize your teaching, what do I mean? When you base your efforts on your students' characteristics and needs, then you can start constructing this personal philosophy, your personal pedagogy, and well, your personal empowerment as teacher. Well, what do I suggest? Well, online teaching nowadays, in these days, requires autonomy to develop awareness of the purpose of education, as I said before. And that freedom that we have should promote learners' freedom too and control of their efforts, not as an obligation, not seen as something terrible, but something beneficial for their own person or as a student too. And well, there are now online, we require some other capacities like digital literacy or the use of varied apps or websites, and diverse interaction amongst our students can support our teaching management, even through the distance. But the same, teachers, we need to maintain our willingness, our empathy, and motivation for doing or teaching, even under these difficult circumstances. I know sometimes our settings or our personal conditions, health nowadays are important factors. But you know, education is a positive, um, I think it is a great purpose for us. It's something that maintains us alive once we love teaching. And that is a good option for us. Thank you very much for your attention. And well, this is my email address in case you have more questions after these minutes of interaction. Or well, any comment or suggestion are more welcome, more than welcome. Thank you very much.
Hello, Marisol. Thank you so much for this very interesting research report. And now it's the time for questions and answers from the audience, okay? So the first question says, how far can autonomy be essential for the fulfillment of the objectives in a student-centered class?
Well, as I mentioned before, the setting has a very, very important role. Sometimes there are some restrictions, but that is an external part. I think the autonomous feeling, the autonomous nature is there in everybody. Yes, if we as teachers promote and make our students understand that they have that freedom to look for information, to look for that part of learning that makes things enjoyable, meaningful. They have the control. If the pedagogy is learner-centered, it is a bigger advantage. Why? Because of course the core in our efforts is our students' needs and likes and interests. I think the culture of autonomy is something we have to take into consideration and seriously, because specifically under these times of pandemic and that we have this online communication, I think the first who have to understand that autonomy is part of this new, not routines, but is part of the day to day, we'll have that control that makes us feel more confident, uh, and especially that makes real possibilities of learning a fact in lives. So I think it's not too far. Indeed, it is a key part of learning. And well, as I said before, I think teachers have the responsibility to make our students aware of that reality. They have the control. They need to change that angle to see education not as an obligation, but as a right, something they can enjoy. They can take advantage of to open their minds, and not just to pass an exam or pass a course. It is further. It is a lifelong learning.
Thank you, Marisol. Now, the second question is, uh, what does the NVivo platform or software that you use in your research for collecting data consists of?
Okay, first of all, it is not a platform, it's a software. It's a software that is very, very useful for qualitative research. I didn't use it to collect my data. I just analyzed this data with NVivo. Once you upload your files in NVivo, your files contain, for example, in my case, I use Word documents, but you can use PDFs or images. The software helps you to code specific segments of the data. Example, I transcribe my field notes. I uploaded them in the software, and then I was underlining those segments that were expressions of autonomy. Of course, it's not easy to say what is autonomy, because that is, as I said, something that every setting has a different concept, for example. But I was very careful defining what in this study autonomy is, what creativity means. And well, I was selecting those sections of their reflections or actions. So what NVivo does is to put them together, everything regarding, for example, let's say attitudes. And then I have the facility to make subsections to make my analysis easier, to see, as I said, the big picture of this complex term that is autonomy, and all the skills, knowledge, and capacities that are related to autonomy, because it's not as simple as it looks. There are aspects that have to be considered when talking about autonomy. It's not just our actions, it is our attitudes too, and the knowledge that we demonstrate. So NVivo is a software you can acquire. In this case, the university where I am developing my PhD has a series of software available for you. I just have to download it. But yes, it's something you can acquire online.
Sounds interesting. There's another question from the audience, and it says, how would you balance freedom to exploit creativity? And this is probably something that you mentioned, that with this idea that freedom, that teachers should be careful at the moment of letting students be free. So so somebody is asking about that, the balance between freedom and creativity.
Yes. As I said before, freedom is considered carefully among teachers, because sometimes there is a slight limit between freedom and disorder. But let me tell you that once you plan and organize your activities well, and your students understand directions and purposes, you can integrate them, and they will be part of the team. That freedom they need is that expansion of their ideas. You can discover their potential that sometimes they haven't seen, because there is a big difference when you restrict students just to answer one correct answer that you need for a book. But instead of that, you give them that freedom for they to recommend, to suggest, I don't know, pieces in their role plays or topics to include. They are empowered in that sense of feeling being part of your activities, not just with something that is imposed, but collaborating and creating when it is possible. I don't know, for example, if you are describing objects, well, let them that freedom to choose I don't know, a picture and mention the aspects they consider meaningful for them, because everybody is going to have a different angle for taking an important fact in that process of learning. So I meant freedom, providing that space for learners into our times, of course, because we have times we have to cover a program. But yes, it is possible once you understand that you don't need to control everything.
Great. And you said something important, to exploit the student's potential. The following question says, what should a mentor do to do scaffolding successfully?
Wow, this is lovely and fantastic, because I saw mentors taking care of practitioners there in the classroom, checking their lesson plans. Because, of course, as they don't have teaching experience, sometimes they want to develop a lot of activities that is not possible in real scenarios. They were providing support in basic things like discipline, in order to be more focused on the activity than controlling the students. Another very, very powerful element in mentors was that a positive attitude. It's very simple, yes, and a smile, a warming welcome, even the introduction. It is not the same to say, hey kids, here is our new English teacher. Maybe they are not yet, they are the service teachers, but they were feeling like a teacher, and that is very important. Their identity was reinforced with that simple introduction, with that respect that they show for pre-service teachers who are just starting. They are not having a big quantity of teaching experience as before. So I observed that mentors have a very, very important role in that development of teaching during, in this case, professional practices. I think it's a simple matter of being humans, working with humans, understanding our necessities, and of course, being empathetic. I think that those were important factors.
And you said something important to bear in mind. Feedback should be positive and friendly, right? Instead of focusing on mistakes only, you need also to recognize the good things that pre-service teachers are doing, no? And the last one, could you please explain a little bit more about bottom-up pedagogies? Pedagogies, please.
Of course, I think this is something we all need to take into consideration. Sometimes it's very easy to go to a book and adopt methodologies, strategies, and things that are planned and that are working or were working in other different scenarios. What is important here, and by the way, research is very, very useful because, for example, exploratory research or action research can help us to understand what is necessary here in my specific scenario. Not having ideal circumstances, unfortunately, we don't always have them, but understanding in this moment, how many students do I have? What are their learning styles, their differences regarding opportunities in this case, using technologies, for example. Yes, once I am aware of these circumstances, I can start constructing my own pedagogy based on these specific necessities, not just adopting external models that maybe or usually don't fit with our real necessities. Yes. Well, in public education, well, here in our country, well, we have sometimes massive groups. We have more than 30 or 40 students in a group. If that in face-to-face situation is complex, now motivate 40 students behind a screen. So I think those scenarios, the real scenarios with real people, with real moments under these precise circumstances that we are living, that is the way to start recognizing, identifying, and constructing a pedagogy that responds what my students need. I don't want to say that, for example, a textbook is not contextualized in all senses. Maybe in cultural things, they are important or interesting for our students, but not all the topics, not all the sequences. We can complement this with meaningful opportunities for us to take that control into real scenarios with real comments, with real use of the language, and you are constructing that context sensitive pedagogy that is constructed from the bottom, yes, to have external or not external results. The final results that we have to achieve can be followed exactly by being aware of what we have and what are we going to do with our students.
Great. Thank you, Marisol. I do appreciate your time and your answers for these questions. Viewers, teachers, trainers, anyone watching this presentation, we invite you to join again at 3:30 p.m. for the following concurrent sessions. Enjoy your break, and thank you again, Marisol. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Bye.